It began with a phone call that shattered the illusion of calm inside the royal walls. While the world admired Prince Lou's innocent charm from afar, a chilling update had triggered King Charles himself to demand an immediate, unprecedented, utterly secret internal review. The call came at 2:07 in the morning, slicing through the palace stillness like a blade. It bypassed aides, secretaries, and protocol officers, cutting straight to the king. No pleasantries, no reassurances, only urgency, restraint, and a warning that whatever had been discovered could not wait for daylight. Within minutes, lights flickered on across rarely used corridors, senior staff were summoned under the vaguest instructions, and the distinction between requested and ordered hung heavily in the air. The king's direct order meant something had already crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The timing made it worse. Prince Louis had not been seen publicly for weeks. No balcony appearances, no carefully staged family moments. At first, the absence was dismissed as routine protection, a child shielded from the spotlight. But inside the palace, silence was not reassurance. It was a warning, a signal that something had gone wrong long before the public noticed. The review bypassed all traditional channels. No formal notices, no advisory committees, no ceremonial steps. Instead, the king invoked a rarely used private authority, assembling a select circle bound by lifelong oaths of secrecy. This was not about optics. It was about containment, about control, about preventing a situation from spiraling beyond the crown's grasp. As whispers spread through the inner quarters, the language was deliberately vague but deeply unsettling. Undisclosed evaluations, irregularities, repeated in hushed tones. Security protocols tightened without explanation. Digital access logs were combed, doors sealed or opened for mysterious reasons. And perhaps most tellingly, Queen Camilla, usually briefed on sensitive family matters, was kept at a distance. Requests for clarification were met with polite deflection, and key details withheld. In a household where information equals power, her exclusion spoke volumes. The atmosphere shifted from concern to dread. Staff sensed this was not a passing issue, not something that could be smoothed over with a statement or postponed until public interest waned. This felt structural, foundational, as if a question had been raised that threatened not just one child, but the fragile balance of the monarchy itself. The king remained awake through the night, reviewing summaries and authorizing next steps, confronting a truth that was impossible to ignore. This crisis had not been born in the early morning. It had been quietly building, patiently, until it could no longer be contained. The answer lay buried in a confidential file, labeled with only one name: Louis. Known inside the palace as the Louis dossier, it was locked inside a secure vault in Buckingham's restricted wing and contained revelations that contradicted everything the public knew about Prince Louis. Who compiled it, and why it was suppressed, remained a question whispered for months through the shadow corridors of the monarchy. In late 2022, a covert task force, handpicked by a senior royal confidant, began assembling a report, secret, personal, focused entirely on Prince Louis. The file bore no crest, no formal title, just the word Louis, a single word heavy with implication. Inside were fragments of a narrative no one wanted to confront. Psychological assessments hinting at behavioral anomalies, educational reports deviating from expectations, intelligence briefings flagging sensitive online mentions. And then one word changed everything: genetic. Buried under bureaucratic misdirection were references to inconsistencies, so subtle, yet so consequential, that they raised questions about whether the boy, known as Prince Louis, truly belonged to the lineage that crowned kings. Alarm bells rang quietly, not in panic, but in planning. Sections of the file were immediately redacted, curiously by an aide believed to be close to Queen Camilla, a move whose intent protection of the monarchy or concealment of something else remains shrouded. Hidden in the folds of the dossier was a name that had not echoed through palace halls in decades. Dr. Jonathan Mears, the discreet but Dr. Jonathan Mears, a fiercely loyal physician who had tended to Princess Diana in her final years, appeared repeatedly in the dossier, his signature beside notes circled, underlined, and dated suspiciously close to the file's origin. Why had he been consulted? What was his role in this? And then silence. One former palace staffer, believed to have glimpsed part of the dossier, vanished weeks after resigning. No contact, no statements, just gone. Insiders whispered that they had hinted at the file's existence to the press. If true, their disappearance was not coincidence, it was strategic. Every inch of this dossier told a story painstakingly stitched together, then brutally silenced. Its very existence undermined the carefully curated image of cohesion, legacy, and continuity the monarchy relied upon. Yet it remained sealed, guarded, feared. But the whispers surrounding the next revelation eclipsed even the dossier itself. A sealed medical report that rocked the king's core beliefs. Behind palace doors, a truth lay hidden in plain sight, written in DNA. The report that had triggered King Charles's sleepless nights did more than raise questions, it answered them, and once read, he reportedly broke down in disbelief. It did not merely assess Prince Louis's health, it shattered his place in the line of succession. What began innocuously as a standard wellness review for royal children, framed as a proactive measure to safeguard public image, contained a discreet addendum authorized by a rarely invoked royal decree. This clause allowed for expanded testing under the guise of long-term health strategy, but in reality it served as cover for a far more invasive probe. The DNA screening, conducted at a private facility under strict confidentiality by specialists with no prior ties to the crown, bypassed the palace physician entirely and went straight to a legal team reporting to the king. The results, according to high-level leaks, were devastating. The DNA markers did not align with expectations for a direct royal descendant, triggering a crisis that had been quietly building, waiting for the moment it could no longer be contained. Behind palace doors, a truth lay hidden in plain sight, written in DNA. The medical report that had triggered King Charles's sleepless nights did more than raise questions, it answered them. Once read, the king reportedly broke down in disbelief. The test didn't merely assess Prince Louis's health, it shattered his presumed place in the line of succession. On the surface, it had begun innocuously, a standard medical review for all royal children, framed as a proactive wellness initiative amid rising concerns about public perception. But buried within that request was a discreet addendum, authorized by a rarely invoked royal decree, allowing for expanded testing under the guise of long-term health strategy. In reality, it was a cover for something far more invasive. The DNA screening was conducted at a private facility under strict confidentiality, overseen by specialists with no prior ties to the crown. Results bypassed the palace physician entirely, delivered directly to a legal team operating under the king's authority. And what the report revealed sent shockwaves through the monarchy. The DNA markers did not align with expectations for a direct royal descendant of King Charles. In layman's terms, inconsistencies called Prince Louis's biological connection to his presumed father, Prince William, into question. The phrasing was cautious, technical, buried in medical jargon, but the message was undeniable. Something didn't add up. Even more chilling, Prince William had allegedly never been informed before the test was carried out. Whether by design or deception, the future king had been excluded from a decision that would alter the destiny of his son and shake the very foundations of the monarchy. The fallout was immediate. Catherine's reaction, according to palace sources, was one of silent devastation. Not rage, not denial, but a withdrawn stillness that unsettled all around her. She reportedly sequestered herself from senior aides, refused briefings, and declined public appearances, offering no clarification amid swirling speculation. Inside legal chambers, panic reigned. Advisors scrambled to determine whether constitutional legitimacy could be questioned, if a child could be removed from the line of succession based on ambiguous or unverified data. The answer was simple: no precedent existed. And then came the king's words. During a classified advisory meeting, Charles placed the report on the table, stared at it in silence, and finally spoke. "This changes everything for the crown." Those 6 words, haunting, direct, and final, sent a ripple through every corridor of power. For King Charles, this was more than a medical anomaly. It was a reckoning. If Prince Louis was not who the world believed he was, the monarchy teetered on the edge of a precipice. Every decision from that moment forward would be measured not in protocol, but in legacy. And the next move would show just how far the king was willing to go to protect the crown, even if it meant tearing the family apart. Catherine was made aware of the results. Palace sources say her reaction was one of silent devastation, no rage, no denial, just a withdrawn stillness that unsettled everyone around her. She reportedly secluded herself from senior aides, refused briefings, declined public appearances, and offered no clarification as speculation mounted outside the palace gates. Inside the legal chambers, panic took hold. Advisors scrambled to assess whether constitutional legitimacy was at risk. Could a child be removed from the line of succession based on ambiguous or unverified data? What precedent existed? The answer: none. The monarchy, steeped in centuries of tradition, had never prepared for something like this. And then came the king's words. During a classified advisory meeting, Charles placed the report on the table, stared at it in silence, and finally said 6 haunting words. "This changes everything for the crown." Those words, direct and final, sent a ripple through every corridor of power. For King Charles, this wasn't merely a medical anomaly, it was a reckoning. If Prince Louis was not who the world believed him to be, the monarchy teetered on the edge of a precipice. Every decision from that point forward would be weighed not in protocol, but in legacy. The review spiraled into a constitutional crisis. The once unshakable bond between William and Catherine began to splinter. Catherine, fiercely protective of her son, and William, caught between loyalty to his father and defense of his wife, found themselves on opposite sides of a silent war. The palace facade remained calm, but behind closed doors, tension was brutal. Security aides reported a hushed yet heated exchange between William and Charles during a late-night meeting. Raised voices, staggered breathing, and the echo of a door slammed hard against stone corridors. Insiders confirmed the confrontation centered not on tradition or public duty, but on Louis. Charles, driven by what he now considered a duty to the institution, allegedly pressed for a second round of DNA verification. Catherine refused. Point blank. She would not allow her child to endure what she called institutional humiliation. Her refusal wasn't political, it was fiercely maternal, and it sent shockwaves through the royal circle. William, long trained to uphold the stability of the crown, found himself split in two. His duty as future king on one side, and his wife's protective resolve on the other. The choice was brutal, and in that indecision, their unity began to fracture. Privately, Catherine began pulling away. Some aides whispered that she had threatened to leave Windsor temporarily, taking the children with her, a silent, unmistakable statement of resistance. But Catherine was not the only one maneuvering in the shadows. Camilla, observing the growing discontent, allegedly encouraged Charles to neutralize the threat quietly. Her advice, cloaked in civility, was precise: protect the crown, contain the fallout, and ensure that no mother or child could undermine the institution again. Diplomacy, for Camilla, was simple: protect the institution at all costs, even if it meant isolating Catherine. Emotional instability could be leveraged, public sympathy redirected, and the press manipulated to cast shadows where truth struggled to breathe. Meanwhile, William's exterior began to crack. He cancelled key engagements, skipped internal meetings, and appeared visibly detached even during ceremonial outings. This was no longer a man at the center of royal power, it was a father on the verge of collapse. A husband trying to navigate a storm that threatened everything he believed in. What had begun as a secret report had now become a private war, not just between monarchs and heirs, but between husband and wife, bound by love, legacy, and a truth they never asked for. And as they drifted further apart, so too did the foundation holding the monarchy together. Amid the growing fracture, a new power center emerged silently, from the least expected source: Princess Anne. Known for her stoic loyalty, Anne's intervention shook Charles to his core. Her motives were precise, surgical, and far from personal gain. She demanded a private, uninterrupted audience with the King, Camilla excluded. The request alone stunned the royal circle, but what happened behind those doors altered the trajectory of the crisis. And entered not as sister or senior royal, but as custodian of an old promise, a vow to Queen Elizabeth in one of their final private conversations to protect the children, not merely in name, but in humanity. She invoked that promise with surgical precision. Then, unflinchingly, she sided with Catherine. She called the review cruel, unnecessary, and warned that the boy's fate should never be determined by a document cloaked in secrecy and fear. She spoke of legacy, not the stone-carved kind, but the kind children carry in their hearts when they grow up, knowing whether those in power protected them. Charles pushed back, invoking clarity and duty, and, composed and unshaken, delivered a chilling warning. You may lose your son or your soul, and only one of those will come back to haunt you. The silence that followed was not merely stunned, it was shaken, before confronting Charles, and demanded access to the sealed report. She read every line, scrutinized every detail, and concluded, damning not of the boy, but of the process. Insiders say she found parts of the evidence inconclusive at best, dangerously biased at worst. What disturbed her most was not the findings, but the motivation behind them. Her stance shifted the internal tide. Senior aides who had stayed neutral aligned with, and the review's publication was quietly delayed. And for the first time since the crisis began, the monarchy paused not for strategy, but because one woman reminded the crown of its conscience. But while An tried to steady the ship, a rogue force inside the palace leaked information to the press. The world first smelled the chaos not through an official statement, but via an anonymous leak. It began with an encrypted email sent to a French investigative outlet, known for exposing what others feared. The subject line was simple: for the people. The body was far from vague. Attached was a stripped-down medical document loaded with implication. Strands of DNA data flagged inconclusive lineage and subject not matching standard profile. The sender called themselves only the Keeper. No background, no demand, no grievance, just the code name that would become the most feared title inside and outside the palace walls, whispered through palace halls. And when cybersecurity specialists traced the metadata, the shock deepened. It originated from inside the royal IT network itself. This wasn't a hack. This was a betrayal from someone within. Panic spread like wildfire. Within hours, King Charles convened an emergency briefing with his most trusted legal and security advisors. No speeches, no pageantry, just raw urgency. The leak had gone global in minutes. Major broadcasters picked it up. Social media exploded. Overnight, Prince Louis' DNA became one of the most searched phrases in the world. The pressure was no longer internal. Members of Parliament demanded answers. Could succession continue under genetic uncertainty? Did the monarchy owe the public transparency? The institution built on silence now faced a roar louder than any royal decree. But the most damning twist came from within the palace itself. Internal suspicion quickly narrowed. Sources close to the investigation whispered the culprit was someone in Queen Camilla's inner circle. A digital key, known only to her senior aide, had accessed the protected archive. Whether it was with her knowledge remained debated, but whispers became accusations behind every gilded door. For Charles, the betrayal cut deeper than the leak itself. Someone so close had chosen to expose the family's most guarded crisis, fracturing the last remnants of trust inside the palace. The leak hadn't just blown open a scandal, it dismantled the illusion of control the crown relied upon. But before Charles could act publicly, one confrontation would set the course for what came next and redefine Louis's role forever. She had remained silent for weeks. Catherine, the poised Duchess, the future queen, now stood her ground. In a face-to-face showdown with Charles, she issued a powerful ultimatum that left the palace in stunned silence. Her son's dignity was not negotiable. For all the whispers, all the maneuvering swirling within palace walls, Catherine had chosen to hold her tongue. While others acted without her knowledge, she observed. While decisions were made behind closed doors, she absorbed. But silence is never surrender. It is preparation. And the time to act had finally come. Louis's status. The questions were delicate but unmistakable. Was the heir apparent truly legitimate under the accepted laws of succession? Could the line be questioned without destabilizing centuries of constitutional precedent? And if the monarchy couldn't answer, what authority remained to enforce it? The palace, long insulated from global scrutiny, now faced a reality it had never trained for. Diplomats, legal experts, and even constitutional scholars weighed in, their voices measured but firm. Each inquiry, each request, chipped away at the veneer of control, turning private turmoil into international debate. Inside Buckingham, tension escalated. Advisors scrambled to craft responses, carefully worded to avoid scandal, yet satisfy foreign powers. Every word, every pause in communication, was scrutinized. Meanwhile, Catherine and William remained resolute, their united front signaling a shift in power. It was no longer about blind obedience to protocol. It was about protecting a child and confronting the monarchy's capacity for secrecy. And yet, the palace's dilemma deepened. Any misstep, any admission, could trigger a constitutional crisis. Foreign governments might challenge succession laws, while public opinion already swayed by leaks and media frenzy demanded transparency. A single miscalculation could unravel centuries of carefully maintained order. In the midst of this, Catherine and William's strategy became clear. They would not bow. They would not negotiate their son's dignity. Every briefing, every conversation, every silent gaze between them reinforced their shared resolve. The palace had underestimated the strength of parental conviction, and for the first time, the crown felt truly cornered, not by scandal, but by the unwavering defense of a child. It was the moment the monarchy realized that some truths could no longer be contained, some loyalties could not be demanded, and some hearts, especially a mother's, would never yield to tradition, not with deflection, but with acknowledgement. In a rare broadcast, King Charles addressed the nation, the weight of centuries in his measured tone. He began not with excuses, not with platitudes, but with a recognition that tradition alone could not contain the truth, that he stated that questions had arisen regarding Prince Louis's genetic lineage, acknowledging the unprecedented nature of the situation. He did not provide intimate details, nor did he sensationalize the matter. Instead, he framed it as a moment to uphold both responsibility and compassion for the child, for the family, and for the institution, in a move that stunned observers. Charles emphasized that the monarchy's legitimacy depended not only on heritage, but on public trust. He assured that no decisions would compromise the dignity or welfare of the child. The broadcast was heavy with implication. The palace was no longer a fortress of silence, but a body accountable to the people and the law. Public reactions were immediate and polarized. Some hailed the speech as courageous, a sign that centuries of tradition could bend in favor of humanity. Others saw it as weakness, fearing the monarchy had exposed cracks that could never be repaired. Social media erupted anew, with debates ranging from constitutional legality to the very definition of royal bloodline. Meanwhile, within the palace, dynamics shifted overnight. Catherine and William's earlier stand had been validated, and their influence strengthened. Senior advisors, previously loyal to strict protocol, quietly aligned with the couple's approach. Prioritize the child, mitigate public unrest, and navigate succession with integrity. The traditional chain of command, long unquestioned, now faced recalibration. Behind closed doors, discussions began on legal mechanisms to secure succession continuity without harming Prince Louis. Contingency plans were drafted, including ceremonial acknowledgements and, if necessary, adjustments to public titles, but always with Catherine's approval. The monarchy was learning that influence now came from transparency and moral authority, as much as protocol and precedent. The stage was set for a historic reckoning. The monarchy had survived scandals before, but never had it faced a crisis that demanded it confront both its own secrecy and its moral compass simultaneously. The decisions made in the coming days would define the institution for generations, perhaps even more than any coronation ever could. Next chapter of this royal saga. Behind the public calm, the palace was anything but settled. Advisors, legal teams, and senior royals now worked in hushed urgency, aware that silence had brought only time, not resolution. Every corridor, every chamber, was alive with tension, each conversation a careful negotiation between loyalty, truth, and survival. Prince Louis, still shielded from public view, became both symbol and pawn, an innocent at the heart of a crisis no child should bear. Catherine and William, strengthened by their private stand, quietly reshaped strategy, prioritizing their son's protection while navigating the intricate web of palace politics, and remained a subtle but decisive force, a reminder that moral authority sometimes outweighed protocol. Meanwhile, the public's demand for clarity grew louder. International leaders, Commonwealth governments, and constitutional experts watched closely, weighing the implications of an unresolved succession issue. Every delay, every carefully measured word from the palace, fed speculation and distrust, and yet also signaled that decisions were being made with extreme caution. The story was far from over. What seemed like a finished crisis, Charles's speech was only a pause. Behind the grand facade of Buckingham, strategies were being revised, alliances tested, and loyalties measured. And while the world debated what the crown had said, or what it had avoided, the true battle over legacy, lineage, and the future of the monarchy was still unfolding. If you want, I can continue with the next stage, where the international and constitutional pressures converge, forcing the palace into historic reforms and testing whether Prince Louis's role will remain protected or redefined. This is where the saga truly shifts from internal conflict to global reckoning.